Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and some pretty exciting news coming out of CA on the historical front. So they announced a Total War Saga. So let's dive into this. So basically what they're announcing is this is Total War Saga. Now that's not the title of the particular game, but it's the name of what's going to be a recurring thing for Total War apparently from now on, which is going to be these standalone spin-off titles focusing on pivotal moments in history rather than whole historical eras. So the way they've been kind of pitching this is they say that sagas is the way they're wrapping this up together, and an example of it would be kind of how you do an era spanning game, kind of like let's say for instance Medieval 2 Total War. And then if they were to do a saga, they would focus in on a particular period. So to me, what this kind of seems like is the Kingdoms DLC that we got back in the day for Medieval 2, where it looks specifically at the Crusades, or it looks specifically at conquest in the New World. Things like that, where it kind of zooms in much closer on a period of months, decades, something on that order. So pretty zoomed in. Now they do say kind of recently what they say it's more kind of like how Napoleon built upon empire or Attila built upon Rome 2. So those are kind of the nearer titles, but in my eyes it kind of seems more like kind of what we saw with Kingdoms. So that's what they state here. Sagas won't be revolutionary new titles or introduce brand new eras. They'll follow up on previous Total War games and have at the same time period, or at the very least relate to it. So that's kind of it. So it's going to be tacked onto something where you zoom in on the particular period itself, or you move it forward by a little bit. Again, I think Attila is a pretty good example, but we'll see kind of what flavor this takes on, as it's not pitched out to be the main title. It's also worth noting that here they discuss it a little bit more, that basically this is the most important point that they state here. It's important to say that this is not our next major historical release. It's an iteration on a previous game built on something we've already released. So in my eyes, what that means is it's going to be built probably off of Attila, because that's what they did with Age of Charlemagne. I think they're going to follow very similar to Age of Charlemagne, but apply it to a different time period. Now, if you scroll up a bit and you look at this image here, well, this is kind of blurry, this could be any coastline, but someone on Reddit actually posted a comparison picture. If we look back at the top here, yeah, where they compared basically the image to someone scrolled around in Ireland. And so it looks like, I mean, this is kind of, it's hard to tell, but it does look kind of similar. A lot of coastlines do, but for me this is somewhat convincing. And so this would, you know, if it's a saga and it's based around Ireland or the British Isles here in this case, and it's, you know, following in the historical time period, the thing that makes the most sense to me is basically if you're going to build off of Attila and you're going to do something kind of like Age of Charlemagne, well, if you look a little bit after the Age of Charlemagne, you're starting to look at the Viking Age. So this, you know, pairs up pretty nicely with the British Isles, the map looking there. So that would be kind of my best bet. And so that is, again, a very focused experience, again, building off of the same kind of map as Attila. It's already built out. They're going to zoom in a little bit closer to the northwest, presumably, but yeah, that's kind of gives you a sense of how this will play out. Again, in this particular post, they haven't explicitly stated what it is, but it seems like the little breadcrumbs are leading in a certain direction. If we move along, they're going to talk a little bit about the scope here. A smaller geographic area, and the campaign will take as long to complete as any Total War title. So that's kind of important. The fact that it is supposed to have as much content as any other Total War title is interesting. The fact that they zoom in doesn't necessarily say, in CA's eyes, that it's going to take any less time. So for instance, if I think of the Caesar and Gaul campaign, that was very much just zoomed in on Gaul, but in my eyes that one didn't play out quite as long as the traditional Total War title, and it wasn't as sandboxy. Yes, it has those elements, but it was very much like a campaign map expansion. So it seems like this saga is going to be bigger scope to that. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the price point for this is going to be a full game? It really depends. I really wonder which way they're going to go, because the value proposition is going to be very dependent on that. We'll couch, you know, we'll push that discussion to the end of the video, but for now let's keep going. So what else do they say? Why is the focus on succinct but substantial moments in history important for you? Well, they're saying that they want to give players the freedom to depart from actual historical events and explore what might have happened had things gone differently. So yeah, civil wars, great conquests, rebellions, things of that nature. There's a lot of little minutiae that you could cover, and that's kind of a similar thing that I've been contemplating with my documentaries on my channel. A lot of the times I've been doing these big sweeping chunks of documentaries where when you go and you do it, you're kind of retreading a lot of content that's been done before, and you're swallowing so much that you kind of get encumbered by it. But as you saw recently with my documentaries, I moved to a shorter form, more zoomed in form called Moments, which is just jumping to the crux, jumping to the crux of a discussion or a political moment that's very interesting, very exciting, and that yields a lot. Yes, you're zoomed in, you don't get as much grand narrative, but there's a lot going on there that you can eke out a lot of value. So I think two things why CA is doing this. One is because you can make flashy titles out of this. Like literally, the way I see this is them, if they ever do Empire 2, they could make a Saga that would be just on the US Civil War, something that may not necessarily work for a full title. They can squeeze it into this. So one thing is they can make very attention-grabbing titles that are very interesting time period-wise. Same thing with Alexander. Alexander maybe doesn't have enough mechanics in it to warrant a new game, but if you pitch it as a Saga, you can make that game. So that's one of the reasons why CA would do it, is because you can cover a lot more historically interesting titles that can grab your attention. And the other thing is there's a lot more history if you divide it up like this. So I think a big push for this is CA knows that with the rise of Warhammer 2, they brought in a whole bunch of new audiences who are interested in Total War now, and they have to build out their business model to the point where they can actually put out more content for a larger audience. So this to me seems like a play to make Total War a long-term investment. And what it allows them to do is kind of squeak out these smaller iterations of the game in such a way that they can space out the larger historical titles. So for instance, historical titles used to come out pretty often, but now we've seen a big gap with Warhammer 2. CA wants to have kind of those big gaps, I'd imagine, between the big hitters, because they're going to be trading off between Warhammer and historical. Not that there's, the teams are competing, but from a publishing standpoint, you kind of want to space them out. So this allows CA to space out their big hitters, and in between have these nice little sagas. So this to me is pretty exciting. I'm really interested to see what historical periods they cover. The value proposition is going to be something that we really have to wait and see. To me, I'm not quite sure. It's hard to judge. They're pitching it here in certain parts as saying, hey, it's going to be taking quite, just about the same time as a historical main title. But again, the time it takes to complete a game in Total War really isn't where the meat of the value is. A lot of it is in the replayability. How varied is it? What new content is it? And for this title, if it's built off a previous game, I really don't see it being full price. So to me, it looks like this will maybe be Age of Charlemagne type price, which off the top of my head, I can't remember. I think it was maybe between 30 and 40 bucks. You guys will have to remind me on that, but I don't expect this to be full price. So that being said, I think this is very interesting. I think it's a good business move. We'll have to see how the value proposition shakes out. But for me, this is very, very interesting. Also for another reason. One of the directions I hope that they take this is a chance to experiment. Because with the big sweeping historical narratives, you kind of can't break the mold of history. You can't introduce some of the crazy mechanics that you could in Warhammer. Whereas I think if you focus down historically on a very granular level, you can start to introduce some pretty wonky mechanics that are tied to that particular time period. So zoom in close enough. So let's say, for instance, that they're going to do something like a US Civil War saga. Then what they can do is instead of the Civil War being a part of a bigger campaign that covers the entire US or the entire empire type map, where you kind of have to lose a lot of your nitty-gritty focus in terms of mechanics, you have to make it work seamlessly across the entire global scale. If you just focus on the Civil War, you can start to come up with a lot of cool, interesting mechanics having to do with manpower or the recruitment of generals, allegiances. Perhaps you can even start to weave in some of the narrative elements in Warhammer that were introduced, quest chains for certain leaders. You can start to get more personalized. And so this is where I'm hoping that CA will take the chance to innovate a bit more on the minute scale. And what that'll actually do is they can use this as a testing ground. Test out little features like this in the Saga titles, and if it works, then roll it into the next big historical title. So I really hope that's kind of the play that CA will use. But that's about it for what they've stated here. Not too much detail-wise, but I think this is interesting. Again, like I said, value proposition, probably 30, 40 bucks, I would think. And depending on the historical period, they could eke out a lot of cool stuff out of it. As for what it is likely to be, well, from this image, looking at the fact that it could be a lot of places, but one data point does show that it could be Ireland, And if you take on top of that the fact that they said they're going to further the historical time period, and they did Attila, then Age of Charlemagne, if you look on what's after that, well, the Age of the Vikings does make sense to me. So that would be kind of my bet on this, which is something that I had been postulating early on. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and definitely in the comments below, let me know what you think of the Saga series in general and what you think this next title will be. And actually, I would be most curious, what would be your ideal Saga time period to cover? I think for me, the ideal Saga time period to cover would be the U.S. Civil War. It's something we've wanted to see for a while, at least U.S. fans have wanted to see for a while, but didn't quite fit into a big overarching title. So yeah, that would be my vote. And also perhaps them I'll stick with that. I'll let you guys fill in what you think. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you think below. See ya.